You gave away what? The sun had already dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a faint, hazy glow that softened the edges of the quiet streets. A neon "open" sign blinked in the window of a small convenience store, its low buzz merging with the far-off sound of cars rolling down the road. Hannah, a 25-year-old waitress, hurried along the sidewalk, her apron still knotted loosely around her waist. Another exhausting shift at the diner was behind her. Her feet throbbed with each step, and her temples pulsed from hours under fluorescent lights. Still, she took comfort in knowing she was one day closer to covering rent. As she neared the corner, something caught her attention, a figure slumped on the sidewalk, half lost in shadow. An older man sat there, hunched and bundled in layer after layer of worn-out clothes. His hands shook slightly, likely from the cold. Lines etched deep into his face spoke of years of struggle and fatigue, and there was a hollowness in his expression that made Hannah's chest tighten. And then she noticed it. A faded Marine Corps patch clinging to the shoulder of his ragged coat. Her pace slowed instinctively. Veterans had always meant something special to her. Her grandfather had been one. He used to share stories of courage, of brotherhood forged in battle, of men who gave up everything for the flag they served. But he also spoke of those who returned home only to be forgotten. Hannah's throat constricted as she quickly turned toward the store, doing her best not to stare. And then she heard it. "This is after insurance." The words were steady but worn down, tinged with exhaustion and quiet defeat. Hannah glanced up. The same man now stood at the pharmacy counter, clutching a crumpled prescription with fingers that looked too tired to hold on. The pharmacist, a young woman dressed in a crisp, spotless white coat, gave a sympathetic sigh. "Yes, sir. Your insurance covered part of it," she said gently. "But the remaining amount is $22. The veteran let out a long, slow breath, his hand moving to rub the back of his neck. "I don't have that kind of money. Not right now." Hannah watched quietly as he pulled out a weathered wallet and retrieved a small stack of bills, creased, fragile, barely holding together. He counted carefully, then set down $200. "This is everything I have," he said, eyes searching. "Is there any way to lower the cost?" The pharmacist shook her head, regret in her eyes. "I'm really sorry. That's the lowest price we can offer, even after insurance." Silence fell like a heavy curtain between them. The man clenched his jaw and slowly slid the money back into his wallet, each motion deliberate. His fingers lingered on the cash, as if it were the last bit of hope he had left. Hannah's heart raced. Whatever this prescription was for, it wasn't optional. She didn't know what illness he faced, but she didn't need the details. The sorrow in his voice, the burden in his posture, it told her everything. This wasn't about comfort. This was about survival. And yet, no one else seemed to notice. A few customers glanced his way, but they quickly looked down again. They saw, but they didn't really see. The veteran backed away from the counter, letting out a breath that sounded far too heavy for one person to carry alone. "I need this medicine," he murmured, as if trying to convince himself more than anyone around him. His voice trembled. "I gave 25 years of my life so others wouldn't have to fight. I never imagined it'd be this hard to get what I need just to stay alive." Hannah tightened her grip on the strap of her bag, her fingers pressing into the worn leather. She glanced down at her phone screen. Her bank balance stared back at her, $1,047. Just barely enough to cover rent. She'd pulled double shifts, skipped meals, pinched pennies in every way she could just to stay afloat. And now, $1,000, that was all it would take to change this man's life. Her heartbeat roared in her ears. She could turn around and walk away. No one would blame her. This wasn't her burden to carry. She had her own responsibilities. Her own fears. Her own debts. But what if she was meant to do this? What if this was the moment that could actually make a difference? She drew in a slow, deep breath, steadying herself. Then, Before hesitation could take root. She moved. She had made her choice. But as the weight of that choice settled on her shoulders, one question echoed in her mind. Was this the right thing to do? Hannah's hands shook as she reached into her bag, her heart pounding like a drum against her ribcage. The full weight of what she was about to do hit her all at once, crashing over her like a wave. By then, the veteran had already turned toward the exit, shoulders sagging beneath the burden of quiet disappointment. His boots scraped softly along the cold tile, each step slow and deliberate. The kind of walk that belonged to someone who had long ago accepted that the world offered little mercy. But Hannah couldn't just stand there and watch him go. Without giving herself the chance to back out, she stepped forward, gently reached for his hand, and pressed a folded bundle of cash into his palm. "Here," she murmured. The veteran froze in place. His fingers instinctively curled around the money, though the rest of him remained completely still. Slowly, he turned toward her, confusion flickering in his eyes. "What's this?" he asked, his voice gravelly and worn. Hannah swallowed hard. She didn't hesitate, she knew exactly what it was. "It's for your medicine," she replied, doing her best to keep her voice steady, even as emotion bubbled beneath the surface. He looked down at the bills now cradled in his hand. There was a pause. Then, with careful fingers, he unfolded them. His breath caught when he saw the amount. "No," he said quickly, his head already shaking. "No. I can't take this." But Hannah stood her ground. "Yes, you can," she said firmly. "And you will." His lips parted as if he wanted to say something more, but no sound came out. The years etched into his face seemed to soften, disbelief slowly replacing resistance. "This is $1,000, he whispered, barely audible. "You don't even know me." Hannah exhaled, slow and sure. "I don't need to." The store had gone still, eerily so. A woman in the canned goods aisle had stopped mid-reach, frozen by the unfolding scene. The cashier, who moments ago had been lazily ringing up items, had his hand suspended over the register. Nearby, a young guy in a baseball cap, seated by the pharmacy, quietly lifted his phone and began recording. Time seemed to stretch between them. Delicate, yet unshakable. The veteran's hands quivered as he held the money. "Miss. I don't know how to thank you," he said at last, his voice thick with emotion, as if the words themselves were hard to carry. Hannah gave him a soft, reassuring smile. "Just promise me one thing," she said gently. He blinked, waiting. "Take care of yourself." For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then his shoulders began to tremble, just slightly. And a single tear slipped down his cheek. He nodded. "I will." Hannah's throat tightened, and she had to fight to swallow the lump that had formed there. "Good." The veteran turned back toward the pharmacy counter, still holding the money tightly. As though letting go might cause it all to vanish. Hannah exhaled, a strange mix of relief and uncertainty flooding her chest. She felt both lighter and heavier all at once. She had done something good. Something important. Right? But then a sharp voice sliced through the stillness like a knife. "Did you just give that guy $1,000? Hannah tensed. She turned slowly and spotted Brooke, her coworker, standing in the doorway. Arms crossed tightly over her chest. Still in her diner uniform, just off her own shift. Only, her expression wasn't admiration, it was flat-out disbelief. "Please tell me you didn't actually just do that," Brooke said, stepping closer. "Hannah, that was your rent money." Hannah clenched her jaw, holding her ground. "Yeah. I know exactly what it was." "Then why?" "Because he needed it." Brooke laughed, sharp, dry, and without a trace of humor. "You don't even know if he's being honest," she snapped. "For all you know, he's going to blow that money on booze." Hannah's hands balled into fists, nails pressing into her palms. "That's not the point, Brooke. Brooke scoffed, clearly unimpressed. "You're unbelievable," she muttered, shaking her head in disbelief. "You're the one who's going to be homeless next week, not him." Hannah turned her gaze away, refusing to let the doubt sink in. Had she done the wrong thing? No. She shook the thought off. No, she repeated to herself. She knew she hadn't. Still, her stomach twisted into a tight, anxious knot. She didn't have a backup plan. No safety net. Nothing to tell her landlord when rent came due and she came up short. Brooke let out a frustrated sigh and threw her hands in the air. "Whatever. Just don't come crying to me when you can't pay your rent." With that, she spun around and walked out the door. Hannah remained frozen in place, the weight of her decision pressing down on her chest like a stone. Her bank account was completely drained now. Rent was due in just 5 days. And she had absolutely no idea how she was going to come up with the money. She finally turned to leave the store. But just as she did, something made her pause. The young man in the baseball cap was still there. Sitting near the pharmacy, phone in hand, eyes locked right on her. Her eyebrows knitted together in confusion. Was he filming? Before she could ask, he slowly lowered his phone, gave her a faint, knowing smile, and then quietly slipped out the door. Hannah watched him disappear down the street, a strange unease settling into her chest. She had no idea that in that quiet, fleeting moment, everything in her life had already started to shift. That night, sleep barely touched her. Hannah tossed and turned under the covers, her thoughts replaying the moment over and over. The moment she gave away her last $1,000. Was it reckless? Was she too trusting? Brooke's words circled in her head like vultures. What if he just takes the money and buys booze? She hated even thinking it. No. She believed in that man. And yet, alone in the darkness of her bedroom, staring up at the ceiling, the harsh reality of her own situation weighed heavy. Rent was coming. 5 days. And she had nothing. She rolled onto her side, tugged the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Somehow, she'd find a way. She always did. The next morning, something felt off. As she made her way to the diner, Hannah began to notice people watching her. Strangers. Some glanced at her with wide eyes, others with quiet smiles. A few nodded as if they recognized her, like she was someone familiar. She frowned, brushing it off. Probably just her imagination, right? But the second she stepped inside the diner, she knew she wasn't imagining anything. The usual morning chatter had shifted, it was sharper, more electric. There was a buzz in the air, something she couldn't quite place. Behind the counter, Brooke stood frozen, eyes wide as she stared down at her phone. Across the room, Chloe, her roommate, was sitting in a corner booth, mid-sip of her coffee, completely still. Hannah barely had a chance to ask what was going on when Brooke turned the phone toward her. It was a video. Her. Standing in the convenience store. Handing the veteran the cash. The caption blazed across the top in bold letters. Waitress gives her last $1,000 to a struggling veteran, faith in humanity restored. Hannah's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the screen, watching the moment play out like she was seeing someone else. She watched herself on screen. Saw the moment her hands gently pressed the folded bills into the veteran's palm. Saw the way his eyes filled with tears, overwhelmed and unprepared for that kind of kindness. The video had already racked up hundreds of thousands of views. Hannah's palms grew clammy as she began scrolling through the comments. Who is this girl? She deserves recognition. This is what real kindness looks like. Someone find her. We need more people like her in this world. She stared, stunned. I didn't even know anyone was recording, she whispered, almost to herself. Chloe, still blinking in disbelief from the booth, finally found her voice. Well, someone definitely was. And now? You're going viral. Hannah's mind spun, everything around her blurring. Wait, how many views are we talking about? Brooke, eyes still fixed on the screen, refreshed the page. Almost 1 million. Hannah nearly dropped the phone right there on the diner floor. And that's when the news vans rolled in. She spotted them through the diner's big front windows, 2 local stations, cameras already on, reporters scrambling into place. A small crowd had formed outside, murmurs rising as more people pulled out their phones, whispering and pointing toward the entrance. Chloe's voice broke the tension, barely above a whisper. Hannah, what did you do? Before Hannah could even try to answer, the door flung open. A reporter strode in confidently, microphone in hand, followed closely by a cameraman. Excuse me, the woman asked, eyes scanning the room until they landed on her, are you Hannah Lawson? Hannah felt her stomach drop straight to the floor. Yeah. That's me. The reporter's face lit up instantly. We're here about your incredible act of kindness. People across the country are talking about what you did. Hannah's mouth went dry. This couldn't be real. She hadn't done it for the attention. She didn't want cameras or microphones or viral headlines. She wasn't trying to be anyone's hero. And then, a low, deep rumble rolled down the street. It didn't sound like another van. It was heavier. More serious. Chloe was the first to notice. She turned toward the window and gasped. Oh my God. Hannah followed her gaze. And her breath caught in her throat. A line of sleek black SUVs was pulling up to the curb. Military vehicles. Her heart thudded wildly in her chest. The diner fell into complete silence as the door slowly opened again. And then, stepping out with commanding presence, was a 4-star general. His uniform was flawless. Metals shimmered under the rising sun. Every movement spoke of precision and power. The crowd outside instinctively parted, clearing a path for him as he made his way to the door. His eyes locked straight onto Hannah's. She couldn't move. Chloe, eyes wide, clutched Hannah's arm. Why is the military here? Hannah had no answer. She was just as confused as everyone else. The general came to a stop just a few feet from the entrance. Then, to everyone's shock, including hers, he walked inside. The energy in the diner shifted in an instant. Charged. Breathless. Every conversation had died out. Every single person turned to look at her. Chloe's grip tightened. Hannah, what did you do? Hannah had never felt smaller, like the entire world had zoomed in on her and she was standing at the center of it all, barely breathing. The general stepped forward, closing the last bit of space between them, standing tall and composed just inches away. For a moment, he simply studied her in silence, his expression unreadable. Then he extended his hand. Hannah Lawson. She had to remind herself to breathe. Her voice was barely a whisper. Yes, sir. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. I'm here to thank you. Her heart gave a sudden jolt, like it had skipped a beat altogether. Thank me, for what? The faintest smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. For showing us what true honor looks like. The diner burst into thunderous applause. Hannah stood frozen in place, her mind scrambling to keep up with what was happening. The sound of clapping filled the room, but it felt distant, like she was underwater, trying to make sense of it all. The general turned to the crowd, his voice calm but strong. This young woman gave everything she had to help a man who once served this country. She didn't do it for attention. She did it because it was the right thing to do. And today, we're here to make sure that doesn't go unnoticed. Hannah's throat tightened. Her knees felt shaky beneath her. Chloe, still standing beside her, reached out and gently grabbed her arm to steady her. Hannah. She whispered, her voice filled with awe. This is unreal. But it was real. And somehow, she could feel it, this was just the beginning. Before the general could continue, the diner door creaked open once more. The murmur of the crowd outside spilled in, then hushed almost instantly. A man stepped through the doorway. And Hannah's heart nearly stopped. It was him. The veteran. Only this time, he looked nothing like the man she had seen slouched against the cold pavement the night before. The layers of worn-out clothing were gone. So was the heaviness in his posture. He stood upright now, shoulders squared, chin high, gaze focused and resolute. And he wasn't in civilian clothes anymore. He wore a crisp, formal Marine Corps dress uniform, polished and sharp. Rows of medals and ribbons were neatly displayed across his chest. And right over his heart, the gleaming eagle, globe, and anchor insignia caught the diner's light. This man wasn't just another struggling veteran. He was someone. Hannah's breathing grew shallow, uneven. She instinctively stepped back. Beside her, Chloe leaned in and whispered. "What the hell is going on?" Hannah didn't have an answer. She was just as stunned. The general turned slightly, meeting the man's eyes with a gaze full of unspoken understanding. Then he looked back at Hannah. "Miss Lawson," he said clearly, "allow me to introduce you to Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Grant, United States Marine Corps." Hannah's knees threatened to buckle beneath her. "What?" she breathed. Thomas Grant. The same man she'd seen fumbling through his worn wallet. The one who couldn't afford $22 for his medication. The man she had handed her rent money to, without hesitation. He wasn't just a veteran. He had once been a leader, a decorated officer in the Marine Corps. Her thoughts scrambled, trying to connect the pieces. "But I don't understand," she said, shaking her head. "He told me he was homeless." Grant stepped forward, calm and composed, though there was something gentle in his eyes, something still fragile underneath the uniform. "I was," he said quietly. "For a long time." There was a weight in his voice that seemed to press down on the room, pulling the silence even tighter. He glanced toward the general, who responded with a subtle nod, quiet encouragement passed without words. Then Grant turned back to Hannah. "Miss Lawson. I owe you an explanation." Hannah held her breath, her entire body still. "I don't remember everything about my past," he said, his voice steady but quiet. "At least, not until today." A chill crawled up Hannah's spine. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Grant exhaled slowly, gathering the words like pieces of a broken puzzle. 7 years ago, while I was deployed overseas, my convoy was hit by an IED. I survived the blast, but I sustained a traumatic brain injury." Hannah's throat tightened as he spoke. "I was in a coma for weeks," he continued. "And when I finally woke up, I didn't recognize anything. Not even myself." He looked down at his hands, studying them like they belonged to someone else. "I was discharged. Medically. I had no memory of my family, no idea who I had been as a Marine. The VA did what they could, but without an ID or next of kin to contact, I slipped through the cracks." His voice dropped lower, heavier with truth. "And before I knew it, I was living on the streets. For years. Just surviving. Shelters, sidewalks, alleyways, I had no name. No past. Only the present, and even that was a blur most days." Hannah's hands trembled at her sides. And then today happened. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear her own thoughts. "What do you mean?" Grant gave her a small, almost fragile smile. "When you handed me that money, something shifted. I didn't know why at the time. It just felt different." He paused, then continued. "Later, I looked at the bills again, really looked. And that's when I saw the Marine Corps patch on the inside of my jacket sleeve. Something about it broke through the fog." He swallowed hard, voice shaking just slightly now. "It was like a locked door opened. Memories came rushing back. Bits and pieces at first, training drills, early deployments. Then more. Standing in front of my unit, giving orders. Feeling responsible for them. He glanced at the general beside him, then back at Hannah. And then, something incredible happened. Someone saw the video, your video. And they recognized me. Hannah let out a small gasp, her breath catching in her throat. Who was it? Grant's eyes softened. My old commander. The general stepped in, his tone calm and resolute. That's right. One of my men called me first thing this morning. He saw the footage circulating online, said he knew the man in it right away. We followed the trail from the video, and that led us straight to you. Hannah felt lightheaded, the reality of it all sinking in. So, the video is how you found him? The general gave a slow, solemn nod. Yes. Because of that moment you chose to help, Lieutenant Colonel Grant got his identity back. Tears stung Hannah's eyes. The man standing in front of her wasn't just a veteran anymore. He was a Marine. One who had been lost for years. And it had all started because she handed him a stack of bills. Because she saw him. Grant stepped closer, closing the space between them. His voice was gentle, reverent. Miss Lawson. I'll never be able to say thank you enough. You didn't just help me, you gave me my life back. Hannah opened her mouth, but words wouldn't come. Instead, tears traced a slow path down her cheeks. Grant reached into the inside pocket of his uniform and pulled out a small, polished item. He unfolded her hand and carefully placed it in her palm. It was a Marine Corps Challenge coin. This is awarded to those who demonstrate extraordinary courage and selflessness, Grant explained softly. It may not seem like much, but it's a symbol of deep honor. And you, Miss Lawson, you've earned it. Hannah let out a small, trembling laugh as she wiped the tears from her cheeks. I don't even know what to say. Grant's smile was warm and full of quiet pride. You already said everything that mattered, with what you did. The general stepped forward again, his voice steady and full of meaning. Miss Lawson, he said, the United States Marine Corps never forgets the people who look out for our own. The weight of the challenge coin in Hannah's hand grounded her, its cool metal a tangible reminder that this moment, this impact, was real. And then, the diner exploded with applause. People clapped with genuine emotion. A few brushed away tears. What had started as an ordinary day had become something unforgettable. A spontaneous celebration of a quiet, selfless act that had moved far beyond what she could have possibly imagined. Hannah turned back to look at Lieutenant Colonel Grant, still dressed in full uniform, medals gleaming. Just that morning, he had been invisible to the world. Forgotten. Lost. And now? Now he stood with dignity and pride, his identity restored. Because of a single moment of kindness. The general's voice once again rose above the noise. Miss Lawson. Just like that, the room hushed again. All eyes turned to her. He reached inside his coat and removed one final envelope. This is for you. Hannah paused, uncertain, her fingers trembling slightly as she accepted it. She carefully opened the flap, unfolded the paper inside. And froze. A check. $50,000. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Chloe whispered from behind her, voice caught in her throat. Hannah, you just became a walking miracle. Hannah's legs nearly gave out beneath her. I can't accept this, she stammered. But the general shook his head firmly. Yes, you can. And more importantly, you will. His voice was firm, but there was kindness in it, too. You didn't just help someone in need. You helped bring a soldier back to himself. You gave him a path home. Tears welled again in Hannah's eyes. But I never did this for money. I just wanted to do the right thing. The general's smile returned. And that's exactly why you deserve every bit of it. Hannah exhaled shakily, her emotions swelling as the full weight of the moment settled over her. Then, gently, another voice broke through the hush. So, what are you going to do now? It was Grant. Hannah looked at him, and in his eyes, she saw more than gratitude. She saw the reflection of so many others. Men and women still wandering through their own battles. Still unseen. Still waiting. Her chest ached, not with fear, but with purpose. She had never meant to do more than help one person. But now. Now she had the chance to do so much more. A slow, purposeful smile spread across her face. I think, she said, holding the check close, it's time to pay it forward. 6 months later. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was packed, the crowd buzzing with excitement and emotion. Hannah stood at the entrance of a newly renovated building, her heart pounding with pride. Above the doorway, engraved in bold letters, were the words. The Second Chance Foundation. Built entirely through donations inspired by her story, it was more than just a shelter. It was a place of rebirth. A space where veterans could begin again. Find meaningful work. Receive the medical care they'd long been denied. Reclaim their dignity, one step at a time. Grant stood proudly at Hannah's side. No longer the lost figure she'd once seen on a cold street corner. Now, he stood as her partner, her co-founder, her friend. He glanced over at her and grinned. Feeling nervous? Hannah let out a laugh, equal parts joy and disbelief. More like absolutely terrified. Grant gave her shoulder a reassuring pat. That just means it matters. She took a long, steadying breath, then reached for the ceremonial scissors. With one smooth motion, she sliced through the ribbon. And just like that, the doors to the future swung open. The crowd erupted into cheers. Tears pricked Hannah's eyes as she watched the first veterans step inside. Men and women who had known darkness, like Grant had. Now walking into a place built on hope. A warm hand slipped into hers. She turned to see the general, his expression full of pride. I told you, he said softly. We never leave a soldier behind. And thanks to you, neither did this country. A single tear slipped down Hannah's cheek. I couldn't have done this alone. No, the general agreed, nodding. But you were the spark that lit the fire. As the doors opened wider and new hope poured into the building, Hannah understood something with absolute clarity. Kindness isn't just one action. It's a ripple. A chain reaction that begins with one choice. One person willing to act. One decision made in a moment of empathy. That's all it takes to start changing the world. In today's fast-moving world, it's easy to miss the quiet struggles of those who once stood in harm's way for our freedom. Many veterans return to a life they never expected. A battle no longer fought on foreign soil. But in everyday places we pass without thought. They fight through poverty. They fight through isolation. They fight to be seen. Hannah didn't have much. But what she did have was something far more valuable than money. Compassion. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look away. Even when it cost her everything she had. And in the end, her simple act of kindness didn't just help one man. It transformed her life. And it gave birth to something far greater. So ask yourself. How often do we pass someone in need and convince ourselves it's not our problem? Maybe it's a veteran in line at the grocery store, counting coins. Maybe it's a neighbor who's slowly fading into the background. Maybe it's a friend suffering in silence. We may not all have $1,000 to give. But we all have something. A hot meal. A moment to listen. A gentle word or gesture. These small acts. They remind people they matter. That they're not invisible. That they are not forgotten. Have you ever witnessed a small act of kindness that made a massive impact? We want to hear your story, share it in the comments. And if you believe that no veteran should ever be left behind, tap that subscribe button and become part of a community that honors real heroes. Because here at Uncovered Tales, we don't just tell powerful stories. We make sure their legacies live on.